Hello, I'm Bert Bassett. I've been a business seller on eBay for over 20 years. I even worked for eBay for 11 years. I've helped thousands of sellers of all sizes to grow their sales on eBay. Now I'm creating videos to help you. In this video, we're going to talk about returns and cases. And the important thing, which is to value your money, your time, and your mental health. So let's just get into it. I got a comment on another video. Again, it'll probably be very small on your screen, so I'll read it out. I've blanked out the person's name because I think, they deserve a bit of privacy, and I absolutely understand where they're coming from. And I will explain in detail why I have a ton of sympathy for this person. They've said, when a buyer claims items not as described and is obviously lying because their first message said shirt doesn't fit, it is impossible to get that item not as described defect removed. I once called eBay 30 days in a row to get a fraudulent item not as described defect removed, but they said it was impossible. eBay did refund me $150 in that case because they were tired of dealing with me. eBay told me to have free returns so it doesn't happen again, but that's not true. Buyer can still claim item not as described when there are free returns. Let's just leave that there for a little while and talk about the quick summary of what I'm actually going to say in this video. So the first thing is, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's going to reinforce the idea that sometimes selling on eBay sucks. And communities like YouTube and Facebook and Reddit and so on are so useful because everybody has a few war stories. And when I see a comment like the one we just looked at, I don't think there's anything wrong with making a comment like that. I think it's entirely justified. So we'll go into that and I'll tell you a fun story. Then I'm just going to talk to you about the concept of having the strength to change what you can, but the wisdom to walk away from what you can't. It's hard, given what we'll talk about in terms of sometimes selling on eBay sucks to do so, but you've got to think about what your end goals actually are. Take a breath and think about the best outcomes for you. Then we'll talk about returns in terms of what's the best financial outcome for you. Let's talk about the money of returns. Then we'll talk about time. How much should you devote to a return, and how important is that? And of course, ironically, time is money. So that could actually be the same thing. Then when I talk about mental health, I think it's an overused phrase, but it's an easy shorthand for what we're talking about here. I don't think you can underestimate the stress and just trouble that you can get from eBay, and how important it is to actually control that if possible. It is, no one should ever be dismissed for the things they encounter with their customers, both on eBay and in the real world. And then we'll just talk about a few practical solutions. And these are not going to be ones that are going to make you go, woohoo, like that, yay, sellers, because the reality is, taking into account the whole thing about having the strength to change what you can and the wisdom to walk away from what you can't, is that all of these things will be slightly unsatisfying. But in the long run, you want to be in a position where you can give a return with a smile on your face, and it will make such a difference if you can do that. When I said I absolutely understand the commenter that we just looked at, and I would never criticize someone for posting something like that, I'm going to tell you a story from the mists of time. And those amongst you who are OGs of the eBay world will appreciate some of the stuff from days of yore. So this is a piece of negative feedback, and it's on my account. And it is the first piece of negative feedback that I ever received as an eBay seller. And it says, the reason for non-payment was I've been in hospital with my son, unreasonable. To which I replied, I waited 40 days before neg. Non-paying bidder filed to get my fees back. Sorry if I've goofed. And you can tell this is a miss of time, because this is from the days when sellers had the satisfaction of being able to leave negatives for buyers. That's been taken away. So that pressure valve of you being able to like lash out at a bad buyer has gone. And it's probably sensible, because these kind of reciprocal feedback wars just created the impression that eBay was some kind of nutty battlefield. All the research has shown is that buyers are way more comfortable purchasing and purchasing again, knowing that the shopkeeper cannot have a go. So objectively, I've seen the numbers on this. Whilst it's deeply unsatisfying that you cannot leave negative feedback for a buyer, it is to the overall benefit of you as a seller not to be able to do that. And when you look, this eBay buyer is still actually active on the site, and I checked out her feedback. I know it's a lady, and I had left no payment in over a month. Account appears to have gone dormant for some reason. Now, in those days, again, you felt a kind of community responsibility to other sellers to leave an informative neg. Like, it was your duty to make other sellers aware of the fact that this was a person who was a non-paying bidder. I did wait a very, very long time on this. And I got the retaliatory neg that you saw where she said, "My son is in hospital." I felt pretty bad about that. But then what I actually did, because again, you could do all this. This is now 20 years ago. I went through and I had a look at other feedbacks, other transactions, and whilst her son was in hospital, she was not paying for my item, but she had the time to buy other people's inventory. So she was too busy and distracted to pay me, but she wasn't too busy or distracted to buy other people's items on eBay. And she wasn't buying medicine or bandages. She was just buying a variety of fancy goods. And the thing she had purchased from me was a game cartridge console thing. So when I dug into this rabbit hole, I realized that, I was in the right, she was in the wrong. I was absolutely justified in leaving my negative for her, and she was absolutely unjustified in leaving her negative for me. She was an objectively bad person. 20 years have passed. That's probably not true. If you're under stress, all sorts of things happen. In those days, payment wasn't necessarily automatic. It may well be that, she didn't have a checkbook, but she did have a way of ordering things. Again, I feel a bit suspicious about that, because mobile phone and the app and stuff didn't exist at this stage. So she would have had to have gone to a computer. But I think the important thing to think about here is that this lived rent-free in my head for a really long period of time. I thought about this an awful lot. I spent a very large amount of time going down that rabbit hole and being Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot to prove to myself that I was right and she was wrong. I did protest to eBay about the feedback, and they ignored it. And, I was just a member of the public, and actually quite young still in those days. And, I wasn't persistent in terms of getting anything done about it. But I tell you what's also important. When I saw that comment on my video, and I thought maybe I should do something on that on my video, I recalled every single element of this incident. And this is over 20 years ago. I am still obsessed. It's still in my head. I'll never forget this. And I actually still get a bit worked up about almost every bad buyer experience that I have on eBay. So never ever think that I don't take it seriously when I see a comment like that, because I know within me, I feel exactly the same way. That sense of injustice, the sense that you're a bit powerless as a seller. And I think maybe that powerlessness and perceived powerlessness is the thing that kind of fills you with rage. But yet, I have survived. I have 17 200 pages of feedback. I continue to sell on eBay, and I've had a great time. So I've worked out ways of doing things. You can too, and let's discuss that now. Let's go back to this comment, and it feels as though I'm centering everything on this. I'm not. I'm just using it as something to put on the screen whilst I talk, really. Um, this goes to the point of do the things you can, don't do the things you can't. And whenever you see this, I know the person who's written this comment has thought about it and is, self-reflecting, because most of the time you kind of answer your own question here. And what this person has said is you can't do anything about this, but yet they do, and they still care about it. And you just really have to batten down those emotions, and say to yourself, what am I practically going to do about this? What's the best outcome for me in a world where the reality is that things are kind of stacked against you? And it's not just eBay. In the entire world of retail, with the way that returns and consumer law works, things are stacked against you. And in 50-50s, and in some cases even like 70-30s, you're very likely to lose. And this is the same with physical stores and everybody else. So unfortunately, that's the world we live in. You can rage against it, but don't keep answering your own questions, like complaining about something that can't be changed. Start making some changes. And we'll talk now about the money, the time, the mental health. You can see for once I've actually put some effort and something colourful is appearing on your screen. A couple of diagrams. We're going to talk about the money of returns and a good way to think about that as a seller. And remember, we all understand the injustice that the buyers often not really looking properly at stuff and they're behaving badly. I say often, it's not often, it's a small percentage, but it definitely happens. So I've got a chart here, and it's a standard grid. And on one side it says, do I sell a lot of things? And then on the other side it says, is this item expensive? And so obviously what we're saying is if you don't sell a lot of stuff and something is expensive, then we're going to care a lot about returns, and we should. So this is where we put more effort. We try and recover more money. This is a focus area for us. Then we have the areas where we care a bit, i.e., although this is expensive, I sell a load of things, so it washes out over time. Or alternatively, the item is cheap. I don't sell a lot of items, but the item is cheap, so who cares? And then there's the glorious spot of I sell a ton of things and the items aren't expensive. And so therefore I don't really care. It's not a monetary issue for me, a return. Now, what I want you to really consider here is when you are behaving about a return in the wrong way, because you shouldn't care about it as much from a monetary point of view, but you are, and why is that? So I have coined the phrase the asshole multiplier, or the arsehole multiplier for the UK fans. And what that is the more unreasonable, unpleasant, scammy, dodgy your buyer appears to be, you are going to mentally shift into that bottom right quadrant of caring a lot about things that you don't necessarily have to care a lot about. And so think in your head, every time you're dealing with something to do with a return, am I being bothered by the arsehole multiplier because this buyer is unpleasant, or I don't trust them for some reason, or they're acting badly? Is that actually making me decisions which aren't making me make decisions which aren't financially sensible? You don't want to pull yourself into a situation where you're making the wrong decisions as far as money is concerned because of the unpleasantness of your customer. Then the second thing is be aware of the loss reducing modifier. And you can see the arrow moves it back. And it moves it back on the axis of, is this item expensive? And there's kind of two ways there. There's the long-term loss reducing modifier. If you get very angry about returns yourself And if you get lots of them and there's unreasonable customers in what you're doing, then by changing what it is you sell over time, you can make this loss reducing modifier. So you shift it, sell cheaper stuff, sell stuff in categories with less returns, sell more stuff. All of these things will make you feel less bad about returns. The other thing, which is really important, is that there are varying degrees of severity of how much your loss is on a return. So if you are selling an item for $150 and someone wants a return on it, there are circumstances in which you can lose the whole 150. But the reality is, if you get them to post it back to you and then you resell it, the likelihood is your loss is going to be way, way smaller. And therefore, that's a loss reducing modifier. It is unsatisfactory because you are paying for some postage, because a buyer may well have been unreasonable, but you've just got to think yourself, it's about the money. And so therefore, I would rather lose 10% of the value of this than 100% of the value of this. And also, I don't want to get into trouble with eBay, because the consequences of getting into trouble for eBay are way, way higher. They can risk my business. Then we talk about time. And I think this person in their comment has probably used some hyperbole here, but think about how much money is involved in what you're doing, and think about how much you would be paying yourself if this was a normal job. Now, this example, as I said, I think there's some exaggeration here. That this person says, I got a $150 refund because I called eBay 30 days in a row to get a fraudulent item that was described. Let's imagine, because we know about holding, that each of those calls took 15 minutes. Then that means that's like 7 hours that they've spent trying to get an item not as described defect removed and get a refund of $150. You could have got a paper route and earned more money. Again, an extreme example, but if you can move on quickly, your time is valuable. You could have been spending all of that time sourcing more items, improving your listings, doing almost anything else which is likely to be making you more money. It's very, very rare that this kind of loss recovery activity is actually going to be a valuable use of your time. And this is what I meant when I said earlier, time is money. You have to be incredibly conscious that even though you are right, and even though there's a sense of justice involved in this stuff, your time is valuable. You could just get a job in a bar. You could drive an Uber. You could do almost anything else. And you're letting yourself down if you allow yourself to be dragged into these things, because your goal is just to make as much money in the shortest possible amount of time that you have. So be aware of that. As I said, mental health may be a bit of an extreme way of talking about this, but you see people ranting. I actually searched for the term rant on the subreddit for eBay, and you see comments like this one. I wrote a whole darn description describing them, and then a buyer comes along and patently hasn't read the description, and so on and so forth. And as I've said, I have experienced this. You've heard my confession already. I absolutely understand this. Now, two ways of looking at this is, maybe three ways of looking at this is, one, if you sense yourself raging about this stuff, then you should be very conscious of that, and try not to do it and be a bit more zen about it. And there's some practical steps that we'll talk about that you can do for this. But I think being conscious of your money and time will make it easier for you to walk away from something emotionally. The second thing I think is that the subreddit and Facebook and YouTube comment sections are actually good places for you to get this off your chest. You can write some all caps emails or rants and so on in those forums, and it's the appropriate place to do so. The non-appropriate place to do so is within eBay messaging, and that arena. If you feel as though you need to blow off steam, actually there are loads of places where you can do it quite well, which is gonna help you. Third thing, which is actually one of my solutions to it, is, and I think this maybe should go in practical tips. I sell a lot of stuff. I've engineered things so I don't particularly care about returns, but I still make time as a hobby and a reward to myself, like a little cookie or a trip in the park in the sunshine. Sometimes I go to work on what I call that asshole buyer. Sometimes someone comes along and maybe I'm having a bad day and they do something and I say to myself, I will destroy them. And then I will spend a really long period of time doing everything I can to like respond to the return in a way that makes their life as hard as possible, and so on and so forth. I don't know whether that's completely healthy, but I view it as a hobby. I actually 99% of the people who deserve my anger get a smiley face refund, and I do not care. And like, it just helps me every now and again to blow off steam by doing maybe what the person who left the original comment did. What I'm really hoping is that that was a solitary flex that this person did, and they've done that, and then they've ranted, and they got their $150 right, and they properly made eBay feel the pain by ringing them 30 times. That definitely cost them some money. But I hope they don't do that every time. But doing it infrequently, that's a fantastic pressure valve, and it's good fun. Especially, you will probably know the rules better than your buyers will, and if they make some little error that you can lawyer up on and eventually win if you're persistent, then that actually can be quite satisfying. But don't fight every battle. And if you're a better person than I am, you don't fight those battles at all. And now, practical solutions. And quite frankly, there aren't really too many of these, because things are stacked against the seller when it comes down to returns, both on eBay and in general retail life. And the psychological change, the valuing of your money and your time, and being able to walk away from things is probably a better set of advice. And I think you probably know that's the case, and it's something in your heart of hearts is true. So just self-reflect, find a pressure valve for yourself, and your life will be better. But in terms of practical things that you can do, the three things that I really do is: one, some categories may not be for you. Um, Clothing and fashion, for instance, is probably not for you if you are the kind of person who has a visceral reaction to buyers not reading descriptions, frivolously returning, damaging stuff, that kind of thing. And it's a shame, because you shouldn't be forced out of a category. But again, think about yourself. Likewise, the style of things you sell. So if you take it from me, I've sold lots of different things over the years. I've finished up on cheap cat toys. And the reason I've finished up on cheap cat toys, amongst other reasons, is that I really don't have any issues with returns because of the category I'm in, because people don't spend a lot of money on it, so they don't care very much about it. My product is a good, reliable product. And also, if someone does want to return, it really isn't a lot of money. I've deliberately gone into a volume category for that particular reason. The second thing is, if you have this energy that comes from people doing returns for you, turn that frown upside down and think about positive actions. And that's dealing with the recurring issues, even if they're stupid buyer ones. Because if you sit there and say, this problem happens all the time because I have so many stupid buyers, again, you're answering your own question. You should be sitting there going, what can I do to my listings that will potentially help that stupid buyer? And don't call your buyers stupid, by the way. It's it's not polite. But you can be sitting there thinking, do I need another photo? Do I need a video? Is there something I can do that I put in with the package to make it so this common recurring thing doesn't happen. In the case of returns, sometimes what you're trying to do is avoiding someone damaging your item or pretending that there's something wrong with it. So you can potentially head that off. And at least if you have a stupid buyer, you can make them do non-stupid things with your item once they've made their initial stupid decision. So think about things. If something happens to you again and again, even if it's not your fault, you should probably still do something about it if you can. So there's that. And then the third one, and eBay relentlessly say that, and the comment that we saw at the beginning of the video refers to that. Offer free returns. You have to both offer free returns and make it very clear to your buyers that you do, and then price it in. So if you take my cat toys, I know on average what percentage of returns I'm going to get, and I know how much on average those returns cost me. And so I have added a small premium to the amount that I charge. I actually charge about the equivalent of 20 cents more for my item than I actually need to, but that covers all of those costs. And that way, whenever someone complains, I don't even read their complaint anymore. Unless, of course, I'm having one of my fun time, let's get a buyer sessions. But I don't do that very often. 99% of the time, I see someone saying, I'm not happy, I want my money back and everything. And I just say to them, keep the item, really sorry it didn't work out, and here's your money back. And often I will say to them, if they're saying that like there's something about the quality of the product, I'll send you another one. And that's all priced in. And I can give people their money back with a smile on my face because I know that I have collected the arsehole tax in the price of my item. And then nobody feels, they feel as though they've won because they've just rattled their little cage and said to me, I want my money back for whatever reason. But what they haven't done is they haven't opened a case which goes against my numbers. They haven't taken up any of my time. And more importantly, they haven't taken up any of my mental space. I just say, good luck, hun. Off you trot. Oh, and there is one other practical step as well. I can't see a circumstance in which if I encounter someone who I think is a baddie on eBay, that I wouldn't block them as a bidder. And you can block people as a bidder. So at least you won't have to deal with that person again. So that's also a thing. I am sure that there is no one existing in the entire world who has cried themselves to sleep over the fact they cannot buy cat toys from me anymore. But my little block list is also a source of secret satisfaction. So that's the end of this video. I absolutely accept that it can be very hard to get eBay to notice you when you feel as though an injustice has happened. And actually, I shouldn't use those phrases. I shouldn't use when you feel as though an injustice has happened. I should use the phrase when an injustice has happened. It's a cold and unfeeling world. eBay doesn't have unlimited staff and time, so things do drop through the cracks. So I'm perfectly aware of that. And I hope it's come across in this video quite how much I empathize with that from the stories I've told you and the way that I react to these things. But what I can tell you is that refunding with a smile on my face is probably the best thing I've done as far as my eBay is concerned. It really will change the way you do things. And it's freed up so much time for me to do other things instead, more positive things. If you want to spend half an hour doing something, send nice messages to your nice customers. Anyway, it's starting to turn into like a folk song or something like that. So I'll leave now. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and please use the comments section here to do some ranting and to share your war stories about your buyers. This can be a safe space for you to pass on some of the miserable things that have happened to you. Anyway, goodbye.